What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Wednesday, August 6th edition of the Ship My Money Show. I'm your host, Adam Scherer. You can follow me on Twitter at ShipMyMoney DFS. 5-game MLB slate tonight. We had 6 games earlier, and tonight looks pretty tough, so should be pretty interesting to talk through. I will say right off the top, there's not going to be a lot that I actively like. It's more so just things that I dislike less than some other things. So really tough slate, especially pitching wise. There's one good pitcher on the slate. There's one competent pitcher on the slate in addition to the good pitcher, and then there's a bunch of shit. So should be a pretty interesting slate to talk about. Pretty wide open tournament slate. I think ownership comes into play a lot on a slate like this as well, when you have a lot of stuff that just projects very, very similarly. It's more advantageous, I think, to just attack low-owned spots and hope for the best, maybe leverage against some of the pitchers that everybody's going to flock to. That on a 5-game slate certainly is a viable strategy as well. So going to talk through everything game by game, talk about what my player exposures look like right now as well. As always, that comes with the caveat that 1, they're going to change, and 2, it doesn't really matter. It's just something else for me to talk about, but you can make plus EV lineups with pretty much any player or any team that you want. There's ways to do it. So going to just talk through everything as usual. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the thumbs up button, all that stuff. Turn on notifications so you get alerts when shows go live. We will be having a lot more content coming soon. NFL season kicking off in about a month, maybe less than a month. I don't remember the exact date, but we will have a lot of NFL content on the channel. So make sure that you turn on notifications so you get alerts for that. Speaking of NFL, use promo code EARLYBIRD, get 15% off of whatever NFL package from Run the Sims you sign up for. Our NFL product is live. Pricing is live. We're still fine-tuning some stuff between now and the start of the season, but we have some very basic baseline projections in there. Obviously going to change, get sharpened up between now and the beginning of the season. But if you want to get in early, play around with all the tools that we have to offer, get a feel for how everything works. It is available. It works. You can check it out. Link is in the description below. A lot of different subscription options, a lot of different stuff that we're offering. You can get access to Shady Advice's Portfolio Optimizer. I personally am really excited about that. I've said in the past that I think he does, in my opinion, as good a job or better than anybody in the industry. It's just playing a very diverse but good set of lineups. It's something that I don't spend a lot of time trying to mimic other players, but I have spent way too much time trying to find ways to get my exposures to come out in the way that his always do. So I'm excited to have access to that for NFL season. That is available in some packages. We have prop betting. We have a very, in my opinion, biased opinion, obviously, but inexpensive projections package that comes with the optimizer and ability to sim 5 lineups at a time. I would recommend that, even if you don't want all the sim stuff, just if you're somebody that aggregates projections or whatever. I'm pretty sure we have the cheapest projections in the industry, $25 a month for that package. I'm pretty sure everywhere else makes you sign up for their full Sims product as well, even if you just want projections. So there's something for everybody, no matter what buy-in level you play, how much you play, your level of seriousness. There's something in there for you. So check that out. Link in the description below. Early bird gets you 15% off. And again, we will have a lot more content and stuff coming up about how to use everything. We have, if it hasn't been posted yet, a tutorial with Davis and Shady coming up that'll be posted sometime today, I believe, talking about more about that portfolio manager. So keep an eye out for stuff on the channel in general. But getting into it with the A's taking on the Nats, I think that's the longest promo I've ever given. Hopefully will be the longest I ever give. But getting into it now with the Nats taking on the A's. Jeffrey Springs for the A's, Cade Cavalli going for the Nats. 9% projected ownership to Cade Cavalli, 40% to Jeffrey Springs. I'm right around the field on Springs at 38%. I don't have any confidence in it. I said at the top, I'm not going to have confidence in a lot of stuff here. We have him as the 3rd highest projected pitcher on the slate. He's 6,800. We have him projected for 14 fantasy points. The Nats have one of the lowest team totals for whatever that's worth. It's still around 4 or north of 4. So again, you shouldn't feel great about Springs. He is certainly not a great pitcher. You have seen him take a step back from his best days with Tampa Bay. overall this season, striking out 18.5% of hitters in 113 innings pitched, below average stuff plus grade, slightly below average command. There's nothing that stands out as particularly redeeming about Jeffrey Springs. He's just cheap and not as bad as most other pitchers on the slate. So he is, like I said, projected for 40% ownership in 38% of my lineups. Haven't gotten to the bats yet, but certainly somebody that I think makes sense if you're playing multiple lineups to be getting plenty of exposure against as well. Those are my favorite pitchers to stack against for leverage, for lack of a better phrase, for negative correlation. It's the pitchers that are popular because they're less bad than everybody else. You know, I obviously don't love going into a slate and just saying, oh, well, this pitcher is 60% owned, but it's Tarek Skubal and he's 60% owned because he's fucking amazing. Not super excited to ever stack against those guys, regardless of slate size. But when you get a 5-game slate where you're getting 40% ownership to a pitcher because, hey, he doesn't suck quite as bad as these other 6 guys, those are the ones that are pretty fun to stack against, even though obviously I think he's a perfectly fine play as well. There's a reason he's getting the ownership, and it is that he is less bad than most of these other guys. If we look at his splits for the season so far, 19% strikeout percentage to righties, 21% to lefties, 190 expected ISO to righties, 165 to lefties. So I point that out because one thing working in his favor here is that the scariest hitters on the Nats are left-handed. James Wood is left-handed. CJ Abrams is left-handed. Nathaniel Lowe is left-handed. So he does have the platoon advantage, and he does give up less power to lefties than to righties, but he's not unhittable against lefties. He still has a below-average strikeout percentage. He still gives up some power. So, you know, I wouldn't, again, if you're going to the Nats, don't just like shy away from Abrams and Wood. You have Paul DeJong hitting third, which, yes, it's a right-handed hitter. It gets Luis Garcia out of the lineup, but also it's Paul DeJong. Josh Bell will be hitting from the right side. The bottom of this order is extremely unproven. Brady House, Riley Adams, Robert Hassel's back up, another lefty, and then Jacob Young. So not a super scary spot for Springs. Again, not a pitcher that inspires a ton of confidence, but also he is outside of Sacramento. That obviously is nice. In Washington, it's not super hot in this area today, which, you know, Washington's another one of those stadiums that I've talked about in the past where the hitting environment can fluctuate pretty drastically depending on the time of year. When you get Washington in the middle of the summer and it's 95 degrees and humid, it plays drastically differently than in the fall or in the spring. It's pretty not cool, but, you know, pretty mild weather for August in the area right now. So I would expect the park to play a little bit more straight up than peak summer conditions. So all things considered, Springs looks pretty good. On the other side here for Cavalli, getting 9% ownership. I'm getting to 20%, and this is, again, just he's cheap. He's 7K. He's not projected for a ton of ownership. He does have a good strikeout matchup. There are plenty of strikeouts in the A's lineup. It is also a lineup that has plenty of power and is relatively scary, but no Jacob Wilson. So you do get that low K guy out of the lineup. No Miguel Andujar, so he's out of the lineup. You have Langoliers leading off. Good hitter, but strikes out. Nick Kurtz, same thing, batting second. Very good hitter, strikes out a ton. Brent Rooker strikes out a lot, good hitter. JJ Bleday is back. Soderstrom strikes out. The bottom of the order is not that scary. Hernaiz is batting 6th. I don't know that I've ever seen him not batting 9th. Lawrence Butler's batting 7th. Then you have Urshela and Schumann. So it's not the scariest A's lineup. You know, again, they don't have Andujar. They don't have Wilson. They don't have Max Muncy. You do have a lot of strikeouts loaded up at the top there for Cavalli. So there is upside at 7K just based on the strikeouts in the opposing lineup. He projects as like a 20% K guy going forward. He hasn't pitched in the majors since 2022. He faced 20 batters in his most recent start at AAA. Prior to that, he did face 26. So, you know, not likely to go super deep into this game because he's not that likely to pitch well. But we do have him projected to face like 20, 21 batters here. So at 7K and low ownership, I am taking some shots on Cavalli just because why not on this slate? Moving over to the offenses, starting on the A's side, I am getting to them, which shouldn't really be surprising. 17% projected ownership coming into Nick Kurtz, to JJ Bleday, to Shea Langoliers, around 15% to Rooker, 12% to Hernaiz, around 10% to the rest of the lineup, Schumann, Urshela, Soderstrom, and Butler. I'm around the field or a little bit higher on pretty much everybody from Oakland. 27% Shea Langoliers is the high mark for me. You're getting him leading off, so you're getting a lineup bump for him. He is 5K. He's obviously not cheap. We don't have any major league data really to speak of on Cavalli, but I think in spots like this, just going to the best hitters makes the most sense. You don't really have platoon splits or anything like that to target outside of assuming he is a traditional splits guy. But Langoliers, Rooker, both showing up the most for me. I am getting to 20%. Hernaiz, he's just 2,800. Shortstop, third base eligible, batting sixth. So yeah, he's not a particularly good hitter, but he is cheap. He's batting sixth. It's a 5-game slate. I'll take the value there. 19% Nick Kurtz, 16% Blade, and then like 5 to 10% of everybody else for me. So pretty much around the field or a little bit higher on the A's. It is a good spot. But like I said, in non-A's lineups, there's no reason not to be taking some shots at a 7K Cavalli. It is a good strikeout matchup. There are a ton of Ks in this lineup. So if he does happen to be on and can just give you like 5 innings and strike out 6 guys on this slate, that's probably a winner. So I like both sides there. And like I said before, I have plenty of springs. I'm in line with the field, but I am over the field on the Nats as well, or at least in line with them, depending on who you're talking about. I mentioned spring splits that he does struggle more with righties than lefties. Changeup hasn't been, as lights out as it was back when he was with Tampa Bay. So you haven't seen the same sort of results against righties that you did previously. But James Wood from the left side, 21% of my lineups. He's my highest owned Nat by quite a bit. He has struggled a bit lately. You see this a lot when young guys come up and they have immediate success. Almost always, sooner than later, the league finds some sort of weakness that they can exploit, or they just, cool off for other reasons. But then you have to wait for the hitter to readjust. He has struggled some, but overall still clearly a very talented hitter, has some stolen base upside, has massive power. He's only projected for about 10% ownership at 5,400. So I have 21% of him. I have 10 to 13% of the Young, Abrams, Bell, and Jacob Young. That's a little bit north of the field on all of those guys. And then I have around 5%, give or take, on House, Hassel, Adams, and Lowe. So pretty much in line with the field or higher on all of the hitters here. I'm a little bit over the field on Cavalli, and I'm in line with the field on Springs. It just looks like a very useful game to be getting to. You have a lot of cheap options in general. Not that the hitters are that inexpensive, or at least the good hitters. Wood's expensive, Abrams is expensive, Langoliers and Rooker are relatively expensive, but both pitchers are cheap enough where on this slate, if they have any semblance of a decent game, they're probably going to be a useful play. And then the offenses aren't super expensive to stack, even though the best hitters are expensive. There's plenty of value options that you can mix in as well. Hernaiz batting 6th for the A's, the Young batting 3rd for the Nats. Obviously, you expect the Young probably to get pinch hit for pretty often. We have him with a 27% chance of being pinch hit for. So, do keep that in mind, but he is still cheap. It is a 5-game slate. So I just like this game in general. I think there's a lot of upside. It's 2 mediocre pitchers. It's 2 offenses that have flaws that those pitchers can exploit, but also do have talented hitters and power. The A's more so than the Nats. So I'll probably have a lot of this one. Kansas City taking on Boston in Boston. Dustin May making his Red Sox debut, or at least I think it's his debut. They just traded for him at the deadline. Michael Wacha going for Kansas City on the other side. Obviously, Fenway, good park for hitting, good park for home runs, good park for scoring runs. 11% projected ownership coming into Wacha at 7,400, 13% coming in to Dustin May at 7,200. Getting some of both. I have 18% Wacha. I have 11% May. Wacha, we know exactly what we're getting, and that is a completely mediocre pitcher. 189 expected ISO allowed to righties this year, 137 to lefties, 18% strikeout percentage to both sides of the plate. Not a lot of Ks in Michael Wacha's game. You're getting a park downgrade in terms of power allowed. He has allowed a lot more of it to righties, which is normal for him. He has a changeup that is good, that he throws a lot to lefties, doesn't throw quite as often to righties, but he's just kind of an average pitcher in general. And on this slate, average at 11% ownership makes you at least somewhat appealing. 4.42 xFIP, 3.38 ERA. Has been a little lucky in terms of run prevention. The Red Sox obviously playing really good baseball right now since trading Devers. Their offense still seems like one that should come back to earth eventually. Their active roster against right-handed pitching this season ranks 18th in WRC+. They rank 4th in strikeout percentage. So I don't mind getting into some Wacha here. I don't have tons. May on the other side, was talking about this in one of my Discords right before the show. I do think there's a little bit of added volatility with Dustin May here because he is a pitcher that was just traded to the Red Sox. We have seen Andrew Bailey with Boston really basically cut fastballs from their pitchers, use a lot of breaking balls. We don't know what their plan is for Dustin May, but the fact that they traded for him, there is a good chance that the Red Sox pitching development team sees something in Dustin May that they think they can use and make him a better pitcher. Don't know specifically what that is, but it is something that I want to pay close attention to his pitch mix, pitch usage from this start, and try and, get a leg up on, okay, does this look like something that's going to make him get more strikeouts or be a better pitcher? He's never been a bad pitcher overall, generally gets a lot of ground balls, doesn't get tons of strikeouts. Maybe the Red Sox can kind of unlock more of that strikeout potential because he has always had pretty nasty stuff. So it will be something to pay attention to. Not a good strikeout matchup here against Kansas City. You do expect them to strike out more on the road than at home, but it's a good park for offense. It's a team that is tough to strike out. I think May is a perfectly solid play at 7,200. I'm right around the field, but I'll definitely be interested to see kind of what he does in this start, not from a result standpoint, but just from a pitch type standpoint. What is he throwing? Is it noticeably different than when he was with the Dodgers? And I do think you can, if you're trying to find some silver lining on pitching on this slate, you can at least say everything I just said. The Red Sox probably have something that they like about May, and maybe that shows up right out of the gate. There's a good chance, it takes a couple starts to manifest, but maybe it just shows up right out of the gate. And you're looking back at the start going, oh shit, Dustin May struck out 9 guys because, I don't know, he threw a sweeper 70% of the time. And I wish I'd played him. Like that's possible. It's not the most likely case, but we're grasping at straws to find reasons to play a lot of these pitchers. So certainly a reasonable approach, obviously not the one that I personally am taking, but I am just kind of interested to see how Dustin May looks here. Moving over to the bats, it is a good hitting environment. Kansas City has about a 4 to 4.5 total here against May. Relatively low given the ballpark. So far, in his time with the Dodgers this season, 179. Expected ISO to lefties with a 25% K percentage for May. Only a 17% strikeout percentage with a 189 expected ISO to righties. Kansas City's lineup for this one is pretty balanced. They have 5 lefties, 4 righties. 2 of the lefties are hitting 8 and 9. So you face 3 lefties and 3 righties in the top. 4 righties and 3 lefties in the top 7, 3 and 3 in the top 6. So pretty balanced there for May. Bobby Witt Jr. getting 21% ownership is the highest owned guy on Kansas City. 10 to 15% ownership to Maikel Garcia and Vinny Pasquantino, and then 5 to 10% on the rest of Kansas City. I have 26% Witt. Obviously, regardless of improvements that Dustin may or may not make, Bobby Witt is a very high upside option. He's in a park that plays up right-handed power as opposed to his home park that does not. So there's that to like. Obviously, just self-explanatory, really strong play. I'm getting to 18% Garcia, 17% Pasquantino, 15% 3,400 Mike Yastrzemski. He is leading off. I'm 2x the field there. Again, May has been better at striking out lefties, but he does still give up some power with that 179 expected ISO. So I don't mind going to a cheap Yastrzemski, a relatively inexpensive 4K Pasquantino, and then I'm mostly getting to the right-handed Witt and right-handed Garcia. I'm around the field at 5 to 10% on the rest of Kansas City. For Boston, going up against Waka, as I mentioned before, he does give up more power to right-handed hitters, and that is likely to hurt him in this park. He is somebody that, if you're going to give up expected power to righties, and then you go from playing in Kauffman Stadium to playing in Fenway with the Green Monster 310 feet from home plate for right-handed hitters to just launch pulled fly balls at, that's a pretty scary proposition for him. It does make the righties here, not even just talking from a my player exposure standpoint or a DFS standpoint, just an upside standpoint for like what kind of pitcher would you want the right-handed hitters on Boston to be facing at home? Michael Wacha is that type of pitcher. Trevor Story getting 13% ownership along with Bregman and Duran, 5 to 10% to everyone else. 19% Trevor Story is the high mark for me. Still very, very affordably priced at shortstop at 4,400. It's a small slate, 5 games. You don't have Ellie De La Cruz. You don't have Gunnar Henderson. You do have Abrams, but it's in a lefty-lefty matchup. You do have Witt on the other side of this game, obviously, but he's in a different price tier than Story. I think Story just looks like a very good combination of upside, gives you stolen base upside, gives you power upside, and a pretty good matchup here against the reverse split Waka. Alex Bregman, I have 10%. I have 9% Duran and Abreu. And then I have around 5% of everybody else. So I'm a little below the field on Boston in the aggregate. I am over the field on Story individually, but I'm not taking a huge stand against Boston or anything like that. I do like the spot. They look pretty good in our projections as well. If we look at home runs from this game, Witt, Perez, Bregman, Duran, Story, Abreu, all pretty similar here at the top. So I'm a little below the field overall on Boston, but not by too much. Individually, I am over on Story. Milwaukee taking on Atlanta in Atlanta, and I have a lot to say about this one. Spencer Strider taking on Jose Quintana. 6% ownership coming into Quintana at 7,700. I do not have any of him. If you want to play him, like, again, I think you can make a case for any breathing pitcher on this slate. It's not like, oh, you can't play that guy, he's bad. That would write off like almost every starter on the slate, but he's not one that I personally am going to. Like, I would just rather save $700 and go to Cavalli. I assume that means we're going to get the super annoying Quintana 6 innings, 2 strikeouts, no hits game where he scores like 18 points or something by miracle. But I'm not getting there. He is low owned. If you want to use him instead of Cavalli, there's not much of a difference. Spencer Strider is the one that I have a lot to say about here. $9,600 price tag, 44% ownership going up against Milwaukee. Brewers active roster ranks 22nd in strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching. They rank 12th in WRC+. On the one hand, I completely understand why Spencer Strider is getting 44% ownership. He is not what he used to be, but he's certainly still better than almost every other pitcher on this slate. He has a 28% strikeout percentage this year in 77 innings pitched. That is the highest on the slate. The second highest is George Kirby at 25%. The third highest is Dustin May at 21.6% of pitchers that have pitched at least 10 innings as a starter this year. So the strikeout stuff alone, even though it's not what it used to be, and there's legitimate reasons for that, is much, much better than anybody else on the slate. 3.74 xFIP, 3.71 ERA. He's still been good at limiting runs. He's still a good pitcher. So I completely understand going to him. My issue, though, is the ownership. Like, he's 44% owned, and he is a markedly different pitcher than he has been in the past. We have him projected much lower than other sites do. We still have him projected as the second highest scoring pitcher on the slate behind George Kirby, I believe, at least. Let me double check that. Yeah, I'll say if we don't, we should. Still have him as the second highest scoring pitcher, but I think you're just naturally going to get inflated ownership when other sites are very clearly relying on just a regression, some sort of regression model, basically, of what Spencer Strider projects to be based on what Spencer Strider has been throughout his career. We are using all of the available data that you have in 2025 to project Strider here, obviously knowing what he's done in the past. But if you go on Fangraphs and you look at his stuff and what he's done this year, and you compare it to what he did in 2023, it's night and day. 2023, made 32 starts. Last year, he only made 2, so that's why I'm ignoring last year. But overall this season, I mentioned the 28% strikeout percentage. In 2023, he struck out 36.8% of hitters. So still a good strikeout pitcher, nowhere near the same planet that he was on prior to injury. 97.1 stuff plus grade this year. That is below average stuff for Spencer Strider. 93.3 location plus grade, below average command, plus below average stuff. If you go into his game logs, because that was something I wanted to look at, just because it would make a lot of sense for somebody like Strider to not have his best stuff at the beginning of the season and then ramp it up as the season goes on. But we're 77 innings pitched into this season. Spencer Strider has not had a single game yet this season where his fastball graded out as above average in stuff plus at the individual pitch level. In his 3 most recent starts, 87, 87, and 86. To put that into context with what Spencer Strider used to be and the pitcher that a lot of the industry is still like projecting him to be, In 2023, he was tied with Zach Wheeler for the highest stuff plus grade of any qualified pitcher. And if you look just at his fastball, he had the second best fastball in baseball behind Zach Wheeler. His stuff plus grade on his fastball in 2023 was 118, 18% better than league average. This year, it is 91. His fastball, which prior to injury was the second best fastball in baseball, is 9% worse than league average. So I don't say all that to say, like, I'm not going to play any Spencer Strider. I have 22% right now. I'm at like half the field. He is still our second highest projected pitcher on the slate, and he is still a very good strikeout pitcher. Like 28% Ks is better than average, but I just think he's going over projected for what he is in 2025, which is a pitcher that still gets strikeouts, but a pitcher that has below average command and below average stuff, does not have the pitch that he used to rely on that was absolutely dominant. His slider's still been above average this year. His curveball's been about average. His changeup's been about average. He still has good pitches. Secondary pitches have been above average, but he doesn't have that dominant fastball to set everything up, to blow by guys. And he hasn't had as good a command either. He used to be a basically average command guy, and now he's well below average there as well. So it's just that if you know the sites that a lot of your opponents are using, and you know that they are heavily weighting what this guy did prior to injury, and you have in front of you that he's still good, but not as good as he was prior to injury, there's just a very good chance that whatever the true ownership number should be, where it's like, with perfect information, he would be here. I don't know what that number is, but it's almost guaranteed that his actual ownership is much higher than it, given that you can see the projections that a lot of your opponents are going to be using. So that's kind of just what I wanted to draw attention to is, again, not to say that like Strider's a bad player or anything, but I'm about half the field right now. I have 22% at 9,600. Yeah, he absolutely can put up a score that you need to have, especially on a slate with shitty pitching. If he goes for 20, you'll probably wish you had him. If he goes for 25 plus, you're probably in trouble. But if this were a bigger slate, I probably just like wouldn't have him. I'd be, because I'd have other options I could get to. The problem here is that you can acknowledge that he's a different pitcher. We have him projected for like 16 points. Let's say he scores 17, 18, 19. There's plenty of ways this slate plays out where every other pitcher scored like 10. Maybe Kirby scores 22 and Strider scores 18, and there's enough cheap bats that like those are just the pitchers you wanted to have. There's plenty of ways for that to happen. So I am still playing him, just probably not as much as the field. But I did want to just, dive into the negatives there because everybody's aware of the positives, I think. Like everybody knows Spencer Strider can get strikeouts and Spencer Strider is a good pitcher. I don't need to tell you any of that. So don't necessarily the takeaway shouldn't like be, oh, he's a horrible play. Don't click Strider, like click anybody else. He's a horrible pitcher or anything like that. I harped on the negatives because that's what has changed. He's always, been somebody that everybody's aware is a very good pitcher. So just be aware of the ownership, be aware that he probably will be overowned relative to where he should be, but that's also not a disqualifier. Like I said at the top of the show, any slate, you can pick a player and make plus EV lineups with them if you want to. So there are still plenty of good lineups you can make with Strider, but I also think it just stands out as a spot where I can be relatively confident that he's going to be overowned as long as, and the other caveat here is as long as you agree that he's a different pitcher now. Maybe you disagree and you just think that 77 innings, inning 78 is where the light clicks, everything comes back for Strider. Maybe it does. And maybe that's what you think, in which case 44% is probably too low on this slate. But based on, what we've seen this year and what I think, and the fact that I agree with it, I do think he's the guy that I would like be most confident saying is just like by definition going to be overowned today. But again, you can still make good lineups with an overowned player. For the bats here, starting on the Milwaukee side, Arcathel's asked Brewers stack or neither side. I don't have a lot of the Brewers here. I'm pretty much around the field. 8%. Contreras projected ownership, I have 11%. Frelick's projected for 8% ownership. Yelich projected for 10. Yelich is projected to be the highest owned guy here. I'm basically 5 to 10% ownership on the good Brewers bats. Yelich, Contreras, Frelick, Vaughn, Collins, Turang. Less than that, I have 6% Siegler at 2,500. So I'm not going crazy on the Brewers. The dream outcome for me is either one of my 20% Spencer Strider lineups goes nuts and wins, or Strider just gets like 16 fantasy points, but like Cavalli does well or Springs does well. Kirby destroys him. And, it's just a spot where at 9,600, you don't need Strider and then you don't need the Brewers either. That's like the best outcome for me. I'm not heavily attacking him. I still think, he's the second most talented pitcher on the slate, probably, maybe the first, but I'd probably give it to Kirby, especially in Seattle. As far as, power numbers that he's allowed this year, 167 expected ISO to lefties, 173 to righties, nothing crazy there. He's giving up some power to both sides, but nothing overly alarming. Pretty balanced lineup. You have 6 lefties, 3 righties. He does have a 30% strikeout percentage against righties, 27% against lefties. So his splits aren't really drastic. 316 expected WOBA to lefties, 318 to righties. There's nothing that really stands out there either. For the Braves, going up against Quintana, 4 to 4.5 total for the Braves. 13% ownership coming into Ozuna, 12% to Albies, 12% to Murphy, 5 to 10% to everyone else except for Nick Allen, 3% to Nick Allen because that dude might be smaller than me and he cannot hit. Does play really, really good shortstop though. As an aside, I was watching a Braves game the other day and this has to be the shortest middle infield in the last 50 years with Albies next to Allen. Like I think both those guys might be 5'7". But Albies, at least does have some power. For me, I'm getting to Albies the most. I have 17% of him, 3,700 batting second. So you get a nice spot in the lineup for Albies. You're going up against the pitcher in Quintana that tends to do a decent job of limiting quality contact. He has been pretty lucky in terms of power allowed to righties so far this year. 108 actual ISO compared to 172 expected. 306 actual WOBA compared to 355 expected. Only a 14% strikeout percentage against righties as well. So I do like Albies here at 3,700 as a value option that has some upside. I'm getting to 13% Murphy at 3,300 batting 5th. Catcher option with some power upside, has the platoon advantage against Quintana. Eli White is batting leadoff at 2,500. I have 9% of him. There is some pinch hit risk here. I do have the game up. For the right-handed, a couple of the right-handed bats, Eli White, actually not as high as I was expecting, 16% pinch hit probability. Sean Murphy only at 8%, so that's good to see. So not as much as I thought I was going to pull up here, but there is a little bit here. Nacho Alvarez, 12%. Nick Allen, 34%. But like Nick Allen's not getting pinch hit for if they're ahead. He's too good defensively. So I'm getting to Albies and Murphy the most. Then I'm getting to White. Only like 5% Ozuna, 5% Olsen. I kind of wish those numbers were higher because, again, Ozuna does have the platoon advantage. But Matt Olsen, I think, is actually a really sneaky play that I wish I was getting more of because Quintana does have a 21.5% K percentage against lefties this year, which is like 8 points higher than against righties. So you do see that big strikeout bump, but he's actually allowed a 205 expected ISO. Only 408 pitches thrown to lefties, so maybe that number doesn't hold. And if you go back to last year where you've gotten 1,000 pitches thrown, it drops to 158. But so far this year, he has actually been vulnerable to left-handed power. And Matt Olsen is one of the best left-on-left hitters in baseball. 204 expected ISO against lefties so far this season. Since last season, 197 in 317 plate appearances. So I understand why I'm not prioritizing Olsen. He's 5,500. You can find relatively inexpensive power upside at first base. You don't need to pay up for him. It is lefty-lefty. And Quintana is probably better against lefties, even though he hasn't been so far this year. But it does just kind of stand out as one of those spots where, he's 10% owned. It's a 5-game slate. If I were just, going through by hand and picking guys that I would like to get to at low ownership, Olsen would be one that I kind of just looked at okay, this is kind of sneaky. I know not that he's going to be unowned, but he's not going to be the first guy everybody's trying to click or anything like that. And it is kind of a sneaky, interesting matchup for him. That being said, I don't have much right now. White Sox taking on the Mariners in Seattle. Very, very good park for pitching on a slate where we need all of the pitching help that we can get. It also so happens to have, I think, the best pitcher on the slate, if not certainly a top 2 pitcher on the slate. George Kirby, $9,900 price tag. He is our highest projected pitcher. I don't really know how he's not the highest projected pitcher for anybody, but obviously, you can make peak Spencer Strider cases that would put Kirby second, whatever. He's clearly number 1 or number 2. The matchup against the White Sox is about as good as it gets. They have shown some signs of life lately, but 29th in WRC plus against right-handed pitching overall this season. Only team that's been worse is the Rockies. They are 14th in strikeout percentage, so that leaves a little bit to be desired, I guess. But Kirby has the second highest strikeout percentage on the slate at 25%. He's at home, which is really nice. His stuff plus grade is down a bit this year in 72 innings pitched from last year, but it hasn't affected his strikeouts, which are actually up from 23% to 25%. The stuff has still been fine. And we've actually seen an increase or an improvement in his command, which is really notable because George Kirby's always been an elite command guy, but he's gone from 110 to 114 in location plus this year. So still a very good pitcher. We have seen the uptick in strikeouts. He's in a great park. 55% projected ownership to him. I have 60%. He is my highest owned player. Jonathan Cannon on the other side, 5,800 is cheap. So that's one selling point is you have a $5,800 pitcher in T-Mobile Park on a slate with nothing but shitty pitching. That's probably the only selling point. He's getting 6% ownership. I guess that's the second one. I have 15% Cannon. Again, my night is not dead if Jonathan Cannon pitches poorly, which he probably will. But I am in a kind of nice spot if he does happen to pitch well, only getting 6 to 7% ownership. He's cheap. I can get to some good bats. Hopefully he just takes advantage of the park. And I do also think he's not a good DFS pitcher. Like he just doesn't get a lot of strikeouts. I think he's a little bit better real life pitcher than people give him credit for. Not that he's good, but probably a little bit better than he gets credit for. I think pitching on the White Sox hasn't done him any favors. 97 stuff plus grade in 80 innings pitched, slightly below average command at 98. I think he's just like he's a below average pitcher, but he's not like a total gas can. When he's on, he can get ground balls. He has allowed a 200 expected ISO to righties this year and a 199 expected ISO to lefties, but you're playing in T-Mobile Park, so that does help a bit. We did get the Seattle lineup. They are running a lot of lefties out there. Now, obviously, like Cal Raleigh is still not a plus matchup for Cannon, but the reason I mentioned that they have 6 left-handed hitters in this lineup is that while he is still below average, Cannon actually has a 21% strikeout percentage against lefties this year compared to 15.5% against righties. Has still given up power, like I said, but he does have more swing and miss stuff against lefties than against righties. So the upside is a little bit higher against the left-handed heavy lineup, even though it's not safe. The upside is a little bit higher. So I'm over the field on Cannon. I'm playing Kirby more than I'm playing anybody else on the slate right now. The park is just really appealing here. Obviously, I have a hell of a lot more confidence in Kirby than I do in Cannon. Although I don't know why I say that because I'm pretty sure I'm in one of the stretches that Josh Engelman spends an entire season in where whatever good pitcher I play a lot of, he just gets blown up. Was very heavy on Flaherty, Suarez on the early slate, and I think they combined for like 6 points. So I don't know. Maybe I should be more confident in Cannon, but obviously gonna feel better about Kirby. Cannon's more of just a salary and ownership play combined with the park. For the offenses here, White Sox not getting any ownership. I'm not getting to them either, which is kind of unusual for me, but they're facing a very, very good pitcher. They're in a park where it's very tough to hit home runs. Now they're not getting any ownership. So that would, I guess, be the case for them if you wanted to go there, is you're looking at like sub 5% ownership to the entire team. Luis Robert is in 5% of my lineups at 4,300. That is my highest owned guy from the White Sox right now. George Kirby this year, 139 expected ISO to righties with a 26% strikeout percentage, 162 expected ISO to lefties with a 24.5% strikeout percentage. I don't think there's a lot that you're like looking to exploit here in this matchup or this park. If you're going to the White Sox, it is simply 50 to 60% of the field is going to have this pitcher. Nobody's going to play the offense. Maybe I'll get lucky. One of the things holding the White Sox back, though, from a roster construction standpoint, is if you're not playing George Kirby, you're saving all this money, and you go to the White Sox, because like obviously you're not playing them together. You're saving all this money for what? Like you're probably playing Spencer Strider at that point, and then what are you doing with that salary? Like you're just giving up projection for basically nothing. Like it would be a more appealing approach if you at least had, I don't know, some like 10K pitcher that really should be 8,500, but is still the second or third highest projected pitcher on the slate. And he's going to be 6% owned. And you could go White Sox plus that guy plus Strider and have like actually a really powerful team where you got to one of the best pitchers on the slate at low ownership. You leveraged against the most popular pitcher on the slate. But on this one, you're not playing Kirby, the highest or second highest projected pitcher. You're getting to the lowest projected team, the only team on the slate that has a run total below 4 in a park that makes it really difficult to hit home runs. It just becomes tough. Drop Rosa said any problem with Colson Montgomery one-off. I mean, the problems are he's facing George Kirby in T-Mobile Park. But if you mean that as far as like amongst the obvious problems of rostering White Sox hitters here, no, he's in the same bucket with all the rest of them. He's, a highly regarded hitting prospect. He is 4K, which is kind of annoying, but no, like once you get beyond all of the very obvious problems with him, no, there's not like additional ones. Mariners on the other side against the White Sox. Pretty much in line with the field here. 12% Arozarena, 13% Raleigh, 11% Rodriguez, 10% give or take to Polanco, Naylor, Suarez, Crawford, Young. Most of the team getting just like 8 to 12% ownership. I have 17% Arozarena, 15% Raleigh, 14% Rodriguez, 13 Polanco. Those are the guys I have in double digits. And then I'm getting 5 to 10% Crawford, Suarez, Naylor, Young. Didn't have the Mariners lineup when I ran everything, actually, so I might have just listed off guys that aren't playing. But no, it looks like that's the lineup. Okay, so yeah, I'm pretty much mostly in line with the field. 10 to 15% or 10 to 16% Arozarena, Raleigh, Rodriguez, Polanco. Like I mentioned before, Cannon does give up power to both sides of the plate, almost identical power numbers allowed. 199 expected ISO to lefties, 200 to righties. Does have the higher strikeout percentage against lefties, but obviously Cal Raleigh is great. Jorge Polanco is cheap, so don't have like a splits preference really. Couple things that are popping up in chat missed earlier. The way you riff solo is impressive. Thanks. Never would have expected that I would be able to do a solo show and it not be like absolute ass. Would I consider a 5-man stack of the Brewers out of 5 teams? I mean, like, I wouldn't write it off. It's not like I'd exclude it. It's hard for me to say that I would play it just because I know that I'm not getting that much of them. I'd play the Brewers before I played the White Sox out of 5 lineups. Like, if you're talking about, like, of the 3 pitchers getting the most ownership, Springs, Kirby, and Strider, I would want the Nats first for very obvious reasons. I would want the Brewers second, and the White Sox are a distant third because of the matchup and the park. Emwald said, can I ask a question about the NFL product? End of last season when announced with RTS, you all said old subs would roll over. How does that work with these new package options? Yeah, so jump in the Discord. You'll get a more detailed answer in the Discord. But the gist of it, and I don't want to misspeak because I was just talking about it with Brian the other day, but the gist of it is that you guys will keep the same price that you had and essentially the same functionality that you had access to. So the plan, I believe, and this is, obviously assuming that there's not some sort of issue that I'm unaware of with like coding it, is to basically give you like what you already had at the same price. Since we did change what goes into packages and there's not a perfect, like everything matches up. But jump in Discord because that was a very abridged version of what we've talked about because I don't want to say the wrong thing. Nicholas said, is there any type of stat showing how a team does when they score a massive number of runs the day prior, like the A's last night? Not that I know of. Like, it shouldn't have any direct factor other than bullpen effects. If you get a situation where like you go crazy and destroy the opponent's bullpen, then I would assume you score more runs the next day on average, just because you're facing weaker pitchers. So like if we look at the Nats bullpen here, if I can find it, if you look at the Nats bullpen here, they are somewhat shorthanded, but they hadn't played the day before. They had 4 guys go yesterday. None of them threw more than 30 pitches though. So they're probably, they're not in like dire straits or anything like that. It's not, sometimes you'll get a situation where it's like, okay, if they get to the starter early here, then they have this one reliever they're going to bring in who isn't very good. And if he pitches poorly, they're going to just leave him out there to get his ass kicked and give up 10 runs. The Nats aren't in that situation. But yeah, that's the only reason that I would expect any sort of impact is when you do get those situations. So wrapping it up here with the Padres and the Diamondbacks. For the Diamondbacks, Anthony Desclafani. For the Padres, Nestor Cortez. 11% ownership coming into Cortez, 3% coming in to Desclafani. $5,500 price tag for Desclafani, $6,900 for Cortez. I am neck and neck with the field on both of these guys. On most slates, would have zero interest in either one. On this slate, they are breathing, and so I'm fine getting to them a little bit. They're cheap. Cortez does have the higher projection here. We have him projected to face 21 batters. He has not been good in a while. Used to be good, but he was also kind of like a smoke and mirrors guy that eventually, I think, just got figured out. Hasn't pitched much in the majors this year. If you go back to last year, 181 expected ISO to righties with a 21.5% K percentage, 27% strikeout percentage against lefties with a 149 K percentage. This season, 4 starts in the minors, 18 innings pitched, 2 starts in the majors. So we don't really have much of anything to go on since last season. So my expectation here is just that he's not very good, but he's probably also not the worst pitcher on this slate. So I have 11% against Arizona. It's still a formidable Arizona team. It's obviously not as good as it was pre-deadline. You don't have Josh Naylor. You don't have Eugenio Suarez, obviously, is the big one for the left-handed Cortez. But you do still have competent hitters here. You have Gurriel, who homered twice yesterday. Ketel Marte is excellent against left-handed pitching. Corbin Carroll, lefty, but hits reasonably well against lefties. Perdomo is fine. Locklear is a highly regarded hitting prospect. The bottom of the order, like the lineup just thins out is kind of the problem, where you used to also have Suarez and you also had Naylor. Pretty quickly, you get into like Alec Thomas, lefty, James McCann, who, yeah, lefty masher, whatever, but James McCann, Blaze Alexander, like it thins out quicker than it used to. So I think Cortez is fine, but not somebody I'm going crazy with. And then Desclafani on the other side was kind of a decent pitcher, like somebody that I bought into a little bit back when he was on the Reds like a decade ago. But at this point, really tough strikeout matchup with the Padres. This was already a tough lineup to strike out and a lineup that had good hitters at the top. Now it's a tough lineup to strike out and a lineup that has good hitters everywhere. Tatis, Arise, Machado, all tough to strike out. Merrill's tough to strike out. Bogarts is tough to strike out. O'Hearn doesn't strike out. Laureano is like, I think, low to mid 20s K rate, but also hitting incredibly well this season and since he joined the Padres. I think he's like 7 for 20 or something since joining the Padres, or 13 for 20 or something really good. Cronenworth, not easy to strike out. Fairmean sucks. I don't know. That was one of the weirdest trades that I saw at the deadline. But like outside, assuming that you get a normal Padres lineup, Fairmean's the only like legitimately bad hitter in this lineup, and most of them don't strike out a lot either. So it is tough to want to get to Desclafani. I have 3%, Fields at 3%. For the bats here, the Padres do also have, they're neck and neck with the A's for the highest total on the slate as well. For the bats, 16% Machado, 16% Tatis, 14% Merrill, 13% projected ownership to Laureano, 11% to Arise, 10% to Fairmean and Cronenworth, 8% to O'Hearn. So pretty much 8 to 16% ownership across the board for the Padres. 19% Manny Machado is my highest owned guy. I have 18% Tatis, 17% Laureano, 10 to 15 on Bogarts, Arise, Merrill, Fairmean, 8% Cronenworth, 5% O'Hearn. So more or less in line with the field on this one. It is, I think, a pretty good spot. Obviously we don't have a lot of data on Desclafani at this point. He hasn't been spending a ton of time in the majors. 245 pitches thrown to righties since last year, 169 to lefties. If you go back to 2023, 188 expected ISO to righties, 200 to lefties. Strikeout percentage to lefties about 7 points lower than against righties. And so I would expect, all things equal, like Jackson Merrill got the left-handed bats are what you would want, but most of the best bats in this lineup are right-handed, and I'm obviously not going to be upset about getting to Machado or Tatis or Laureano against him. So basically 10 to 20% ownership to most of the Padres for me. On the other side for Arizona, 20% ownership is coming into Ketel Marte. He's the highest owned guy on the team, and that is for good reason. 11% ownership to Lourdes Gurriel, and then 5 to 10% to the rest of the team. I have 17% Ketel Marte at 5,900. That is my highest owned guy. I have 13% Gurriel. Everybody else is, I have 9% Locklear, 7% Alexander, 5% or less of everybody else. So I am actually a little below the field right now on Arizona as a whole. Even Ketel Marte, I guess, I'm slightly below the field, but pretty close on Gurriel, close on Locklear, and then I kind of just drop off everywhere else. That's not that I don't think like Arizona's a good team or a good offense to stack. Like I don't think Cortez is good, but I'm just getting some other offenses a little bit more. Certainly wouldn't try to talk anybody off of them. So to recap my exposures and the overall projections, I'll put the highest projected players up on the screen and run through my highest owned players as things currently stand. George Kirby, Jeffrey Springs, Spencer Strider, my 3 highest owned pitchers. Again, I am likely to be below the field on Strider, and I am right now, but he is still in my top 3. At catcher, Shea Langoliers, Cal Raleigh, Sean Murphy. At first base, Nick Kurtz, Vinny Pasquantino, Luis Ariz. At second base, Ketel Marte, Ozzy Albies, and Jorge Polanco. At third base, Manny Machado, Michael Garcia, and then Darrell Hernaiz and Alex Bregman are tied for third. At shortstop, Bobby Witt Jr., Trevor Story, and Xander Bogaerts. In the outfield, Brent Rooker, James Wood, Fernando Tatis, Ramon Laureano, Randy Arozarena are my top 5 for a home run pick. I'm not going to go Cal Raleigh. I think that's cheating. Suarez is probably cheating. I'm going to go Nick Kurtz against Cavalli. Fringe major league guy, 4A guy in Cavalli. Kurtz, excellent power hitter. I will go with Kurtz. Henry asked if Arizona's roof is closed with 111-degree temperature. I haven't looked, but if it's 111 degrees, I'm going to assume so. That I don't care if it's dry or not. I don't think you're intentionally playing baseball in that. So that's all I got for this. Oh, top stacks for me. Highest overall stack exposures. A's number 1, Padres number 2, Nats number 3, Mariners number 4, Royals number 5. 5-man stacks. San Diego 1, Kansas City 2, Athletics 3, Mariners 4, and Diamondbacks and Nats are tied for 5th. That's all I have for you on this one. Thank you for checking out the show. Don't forget to use promo code EARLYBIRD. Sign up for whatever NFL package you need. There's a bunch there. Read through them. Whatever fits your needs, it's going to be there somewhere. Use promo code EARLYBIRD. Get 15% off. Thumbs up button. Subscribe to the channel. All that stuff. Not going to do a show tomorrow. There's like 4 games throughout the day. I don't know that there will even be like a real slate, but I will be back on Friday. So thanks again, and I'll see you guys on Friday.